On today's episode of the Locked On Padres podcast. Oh, but wait just a second. It's not just the Locked On Padres podcast. Another crossover for you folks on this fine Thursday, Friday, or heck, even 2028. I don't know when you're listening to this, frankly. It could be any time. Maybe you just were curious about what it looked like before the empire fell. Not to get too morbid, though, I'm being joined by, for this podcast, Locked On Orioles host, who has not been on the show in a very long time. Dare I say, the last time we talked about Manny Machado moments back in the COVID shortened season, I believe was the last time we did that. Connor Newcomb, Locked On Orioles, sir, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. I feel like the tides have turned for these two teams a bit since the last time we've done a crossover. I'm sure we'll get into that, but having a fine February evening here.
Yeah, for sure. We're going to talk about that. We're going to be talking about Anthony Santander and whether or not he is a trade candidate for the Padres right now or in the future, and just in general the state of the Orioles, because like Connor said, it's kind of the inverse that's going on right now. You used to be, dare I say, not the joke, not you, but the team used to be a little bit of the meme. You know what I mean? You were part of what the Locked On hosts used to call the Sad Boys conglomerate, which was basically all the teams that are miserable. Hilariously enough, Bryce Patrick, host of Locked On Rangers, was also part of that club. So if history repeats itself, you have some good fortune headed your way. It used to be just talking about, oh yeah, I remember when Gleyber Torres would hit a home run every time. And now instead it's, hey, you know how the Orioles, every single batter in their lineup is good? They're all young and they haven't spent anything. And they have the best farm system in the sport. So, man, I mean, just talk about what's the state of the Orioles right now. I feel like I summed it up pretty well, but ahead of spring training, dare I say, the most exciting team in the American League that people are looking forward to.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, we got a little wet blanket last week with Kyle Bradish with his UCL sprain coming off. We saw it. I, as a Kyle Bradish head from the beginning, from the moment he was traded from the Angels for Dylan Bundy, but many people didn't see it coming. And then all of a sudden, what does he do? 2.8 ERA, fourth in AL Cy Young last year. They add Corbin Burns, and we're like, hold on, Corbin Burns, Kyle Bradish, who finished fourth in AL Cy Young voting, Grayson Rodriguez, who was the top pitching prospect in baseball and figured it out in the second half. And then we're like, Dean Kramer, solid back end guy. John Means back from Tommy John, used to be an ace, threw a no-hitter at one point.
No-hitter, yeah.
And then everybody shows up to spring training, and you kind of realize why the Orioles made the Corbin Burns trade. Oh, yeah, Kyle Bradish has a small tear in his UCL in January. John Means is not going to be ready for opening day. And so that has me in a little different headspace. But overall, I mean, still, even with those guys out for a little bit, and it could be a lot of bit for Kyle Bradish, but yeah, I mean, you summed it up well. 1 through 9, I don't know if the Orioles will have the star power of some other teams. I mean, they have Adley Rutschman, they have Gunnar Henderson, but the depth of the lineup, I mean, it's not just 1 through 9. They could be 1 through 12, 1 through 13 hitters wise, where when guys get days off, they're not going to be losing a lot. And that's going to be one of the coolest parts of this team is like, okay, you know what? Gunnar Henderson is getting the day off today. We're just going to play Jackson Holiday, baseball's number one prospect at shortstop today. Like it'll be totally fine. Cedric Mullins needs to sit today. Well, that's okay. We'll just put Colton Cowser in center field, who's, a consensus top 100 prospect in baseball. Like that's what this team looks like right now. Now, again, the wet blanket a little bit on the pitching. So that's the Orioles. The bats are there. The pitching is still a question, but the excitement level is unbelievable in spring training, because even in the Buck Showalter, Adam Jones, Nick Markakis, Manny Machado era Orioles, they never won 100 games. They did win the AL East one year, but they won the AL East where they won 96 games and they won the division by like 10 games. It was like a horrible AL East the year that they won. They fought with the Rays until the second last day of the season and still won this division. And they didn't have the kind of young talent back then that they have now. It's on a different level of excitement. And again, it's been 40 years since the Orioles won the World Series. So one of those would be nice. And it's hard to be like it's World Series or bust because this team is so young, but we're starting to get those feelings a little bit.
Yeah, man. I mean, the Orioles, those Machado teams were like, screw you. We have 4 guys that are going to hit 40 home runs and we don't care about anything else. And then I guess Zach Britton will close sometimes.
Yep. Don't care about defense that much. Yeah. We don't care about speed. Those teams,
I remember that. Yeah.
It would be hilarious to watch those teams in 2024 baseball with the new stolen base rules, because
Yeah.
you were putting out a lineup where like your speedster was Adam Jones, who stole 10 bases a year, maybe in his prime. Like you were
Those
running
teams
out
ruled.
Manny
Those teams
Machado,
ruled.
yeah,
Yeah.
Machado did steal bases when he was younger. I'll give him
Mhm.
credit. But once he tore the ACL, he was like,
Yeah.
I'm done stealing bases, which totally get it. Like never, yeah,
Yeah.
100% do your thing, like mash. But it was Machado who's like, I'm fast, but I'm not running. And then he put on muscle and he couldn't run anyway.
Mhm.
Jonathan Scope doesn't run well. JJ Hardy
Right.
used to run like he had rocks in his shoes. Then you had Matt Wieters, who was like a 6'4", 250 catcher. And then you had Mark Trumbo lumbering around out there. At one point, they had Nelson Cruz. They had Pedro Alvarez. Like these guys were gigantic. And
Mhm.
so it would be funny when they would, like at the end of one year, they signed Michael Bourne. The O's had an injury in the outfield and they signed
Right.
like
Yeah.
mid-30s Michael Bourne, who was like a base stealer in his 20s. And he might have stolen like 4 bases in September after they signed him. The O's were like, whoa, got a speedster on the bases.
Yeah.
Watch out.
It's unbelievable. And shout out Mark Trumbo, former enemy of the Padres when he was on the Diamondbacks. And then first half Mark Trumbo, there's been talks that first half Mark Trumbo could be the best player in the history of baseball. But didn't always pan out that way. But it is funny that the whole team is like, oh, we'll bring in Nelson Cruz. He's coming off a PED suspension, whatever.
Yeah.
He'll be even better here. So now though, this is a team that's like, screw you, every single thing on our team is good now. It's not just power, it's not just defense, it's not just the bullpen, let's say, whatever. It's around the board. And I think that that is why they've been turning so many heads, is also because they upgrade the pitching. And I'm with you also. Just also the Grayson Rodriguez thing is crazy. I think people do forget number one pitching prospect formerly in baseball. And the first half thing is real. 7.35 ERA in the first half, 2.58 in the second half, just to paint a picture for people. And then, like you mentioned, John Means like probably terrifies you if he's your number one. But if he's just this like fun little guy you can throw in at the end of the rotation, that's really exciting. And now you have Corbin Burns, who won the Cy Young not too long ago. So the Orioles are there, man. And look, I live on the East Coast, so I'll be seeing a lot of it. There's an easy chance that the AL East is the most fun division to watch this year. You still have the Blue Jays at least a little bit in it. The Yankees have my former boy, obviously, now over there, which probably is the most personality that they've had on the team, dare I say, in like 20 years. So congrats to the Yankees on that. Maybe that'll help them out. That's really fun. But what I really want to hone in on is something that both of our teams do share, aside from Manny Machado, who we both love, of course. Um, the change in ownership. And again, I talked about this a lot on my pod where I was like, look, guys, I like the Orioles, but as of right now, I don't see how they win a World Series if you have an owner who, in the middle of their historic season, was like, hey, by the way, say goodbye to these guys. I'm paraphrasing, of course, because we'll have to hike ticket prices. And all of a sudden, a new ownership group comes in, and as if they wanted to validate me, the Corbin Burns trade happens, I'm going to say around a week later. I just don't think that that's a coincidence. And I think that what we've seen throughout baseball is that this is how you win. I'm not saying you have to spend as much as the Padres. I know I'm going to get comments about that. It's just spending in general. And the Orioles have one of the like greater, they're in one of the better positions that I've seen a team in a long, long time, where everybody's young. They have a payroll of 32 million, I'm going to guess.
That's
Is
what it
that what
feels
they
like.
have right now?
That's what it feels like. Still, they are up to, I
Ooh.
believe, 25th. They were 29th in baseball last year. I believe with Corbin Burns, they've shot up to 96 million, and I believe that is 25th in baseball.
Wow. That is just stupendous. And we're going to keep talking about that, guys, in just a second. But before we do that, I want to talk about something else that has to do with money and prices. But they're here to save in a good way, not because they're a cheapskate billionaire. Don't worry. Gametime, ladies and gentlemen, they're here to help you out with your Orioles or Padres tickets for next season. You're going to want them both. Both of these teams are going to be awesome. You don't have to worry about last minute stuff. They've got last minute deals for you, flash deals, zone deals, all sorts of stuff. It's easy to find it also for all sort of events. If you, for some reason, you just saw Connor and you said, oh, what's this guy up to? I want to see. Oh, I'm not a sports fan. Well, don't worry, because they also got you on concerts. They got you on theater. They've got you on comedy tours and whatnot. They've got you at everything. Playoff games. Gametime has you covered. Lowest prices guaranteed. Event cancellation protection. Job loss protection. And as a cutesy little bonus, they show you the previews of the seats before you buy them, if you're a visual learner like myself. So download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, create that account and redeem code Locked On. Title of this podcast, you should be able to figure that out, for $20 off. Gametime, last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. Go check that bad boy out. And just like that, we're done with segment 1. We're done with just a third of the podcast. Isn't that amazing? We've been blessing our listeners with just nothing but truth and hope, dare I say, so far. We still got more to talk about. The thing with the spending, Connor, is when we first crossover, which is, I believe, 2020, early 2020, because that's all we could do at the time. The Orioles were miserable. I mean, again, this is like, I'm so happy for you. You know what I mean? Like, you were in the trenches, man. I at least, like, even when the Padres disappoint me, or I'd be wearing my Joker hat and getting upset online, like, at the minimum, it was like, well, it's a competitive team. It's a team that should be competitive. They are signing Bogarts. They're trading for Darvish and Snell. It's just like, hey, what if Ryan Mountcastle hits 30 home runs this year? That might be cool. And then he did it. Or did he? Hold on.
He did.
He did? Okay.
Yeah.
What if Ryan Mountcastle's a 4-win player? Don't know if that'll ever happen, but it was still like you were kind of grasping at straws, for lack of a better term. Nowadays, I mean, you look at this roster and it's crazy all over the place. And because of the new ownership, they can now do anything. If it comes up at the trade deadline that they're like, you know what, we're really good, let's trade for Mike Trout, that wouldn't surprise me. Oh, hey, let's go sign. I mean, it's crazy free agents next year. You got Max Fried available. Walker Buehler is going to be a free agent. They could do that. They could go sign Juan Soto. And the fact that they could do any of those moves and still probably be at a payroll below like 65 million after one of those signings just illustrates how much in the driver's seat they are. And for Padres fans who yell at me about how you need to spend and keep your good players, that is true. Don't get me wrong. That farm guys aren't a guarantee. And I'm not saying that if you keep your farm together, you will get the cornucopia of prospects that the Orioles have. I believe it's the last 3 seasons the Orioles have had not just the top ranked farm system, but the top overall prospect in baseball, from Rutschman to Gunnar Henderson last year and then Jackson Holliday this year. That's not normal, but it shows you there's just so much flexibility here. And I think that there's actually something that the Padres could take a lesson from. They got the money spending down. That's a big part, but the Orioles also have just smart, savvy little moves and potentially new ownership. And Connor, as someone who got new ownership recently, it's a lot of fun, man. It's really fun seeing that someone actually cares about baseball, at least a little bit, at least enough to make you have hope again, you know?
Yeah, and that is the hope. And we don't know yet because David Rubenstein, who's the new owner, has not been confirmed yet. Now, Rob Manfred has said multiple times they're kind of fast tracking this process. And it's funny how it happens. I mean, you know, if somebody's going to pony up the money, the other owners aren't really going to vote no on an owner unless they kind of have like a personal vendetta against him. But it's very funny that it is David Rubenstein, who I didn't know much about, but that might just be because of the tax bracket that I'm in. Like if you're in a much higher one, David Rubenstein is one of the most well-known billionaires in the world. Now he's not one of the like, you know, tippy top Steve Cohen type richest guys. He's worth somewhere between 4 and 5 billion, which is more than double than Angelo's, which is nice to have. But he also is well known because he hosts multiple shows on Bloomberg. Like he's always emceeing events and hosting events. He's very front facing. Whereas John Angelos, who says something stupid every single time he speaks, Rubenstein's speaking on camera like once a week for eternity, basically, it seems like. And he's done things like he donated $15 million to help restore the Washington Monument. And he bought a original copy of the Magna Carta for $21 million and immediately donated it to the Smithsonian in DC. He's known as like, I forget what they called it. It was like patriotic charity. That wasn't exactly the word, but that's what they call him basically.
I like that. Yeah.
And so he's very well known, again, and people above me tax bracket wise, but he's very, very well known.
Mhm.
And so that apparently means that the owners are going to fast track this, because all like the background research they have to do on owners who are kind of rich in the shadows,
Yeah.
they don't have to
Mhm.
do on Rubenstein, because everybody knows how he made his money and everybody knows what he does with his money. And
Yeah.
so apparently this is going to be quick, and people are saying like it could be approved before opening day. And here's the thing, to bring it back to a Padres situation here. If this gets approved in 2 weeks and
Mhm.
Blake Snell is still a free agent, I
Yeah.
mean, I'm just saying, if the O's
Yeah.
are going to lose Kyle Bradish to Tommy John surgery and they know that's a potential thing to happen, like, why not be your first splash as owner day 2 signing Blake Snell? Why not?
Be like, "Hey, remember when you guys were sad we lost Manny Machado? Well, we're taking their best pitcher because I feel like it," to be like
Yeah.
Kevin Costner from Draft Day. I could totally see it, and that was one of the things I wanted to bring up too is, like, how much this ownership thing not just impacts their future, and in my opinion, easily puts them in the front seat to be one of my favorites to win within the next few years because they've shown we will do what it takes. And it's not like they have bad contracts to worry about right now. You know what I mean? I can't think of a single contract on that team. I'm looking at the roster right now. There's got to be
No,
some weird.
there's
Craig
no,
Kimbrell's weird, but it's not
well,
like a
Mike
big deal.
Elias has
Yeah.
not signed any player to a
Mhm.
multi-year deal since taking over. So there is no, they still have Chris Davis money on the books, but it's dwindling year by year, and it's a lot of deferred money. And it's
Yes.
basically, it's the hit for Chris Davis is down to like, I might be wrong on this, but it's down to like 5 million a year for a few
Mhm.
years. And then it's down to like
Yeah.
2 million a year. So it's, and especially with the new ownership group, that's nothing. And
God, I wish I was good
Craig
at sports.
Kimbrell, yeah, they gave him $13 million, which is like really for Craig Kimbrell, but it's 1
Yeah,
year. So you don't
exactly.
really, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. Like, and
Yeah,
they made that deal under Angelos. So imagine what they'll do
exactly.
to, under Rubenstein. I would love to see them give out a multi-year deal. But the big thing too is like, yeah, Blake Snell would be awesome, or Jordan Montgomery, especially with Bradish going down.
Mhm.
But like, I get that people say, oh, look at the Padres, look at the Mets, like spending that much in free agency, it's not going to
Mhm.
do it for you. You can also operate like the Braves. You can just
Yeah.
use all your money to lock up all of your insanely talented young
Mhm.
players. And you know what team with insanely talented young players reminds me of the Braves a couple years ago? The Orioles right now, with
Yeah.
all of these talented hitters.
Mhm.
And the Braves just said 7-year deal, 8-year deal, 10-year deal, 5-year, and they just locked everybody up. The Orioles, without going and getting the marquee free agent, could just lock this team up with Rubenstein's money. And I
Yeah.
think fans would honestly be happier about that, because you know what? There's not a free agent out there better than Gunnar Henderson, Orioles think.
Yes.
There's not a free agent catcher in the world better than Adley Rutschman. So you might as
Yeah.
well just extend them and keep them here. And that would make O's fans happier than Blake Snell, honestly. And so I think that's got to be number one, and that's what could change things. So maybe the Orioles aren't getting all the clicks and doing the big time moves,
Mhm.
but maybe 10 years for Gunnar Henderson and 10 years for Adley Rutschman, maybe that impacts this team more than 4 years for Blake Snell. And I think O's fans, that's how they want to
Yeah.
see the money be spent.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's definitely one way to do it, and again, like, the Braves is a great point to bring up. It's just different positions, like, your guys is Acuna is probably Rutschman right now, right? Like, but in terms of just wins above replacement, stuff like that. But it's exciting, man, and if you go it's like you can't lose. Like, the because of the fact that you have no, like, salary going out, and like Chris Davis, like the 5, like that's nothing. Like you said with Kimbrel, I think that signing was almost bad only because everyone was like, yeah, well, the Orioles don't spend. So if you're going to spend 13 million on this one guy, like that might be it. But now it's like, oh, who cares? Yeah, maybe he's good, maybe he's not, whatever. And then you still have a great bullpen too. Yeah, I would advise Orioles fans as well that what the Padres did was they bought everyone too quickly. Where that's how I viewed it, where it's like, let's do all these trades. And then last year, when you have all these questions still about the team, you extended Machado, Cronenworth, Darvish, and signed Bogarts. I think my only advice would just be like, don't do it all at once. But like you said, the Braves, I mean, most of their players, if not all of them, are kind of on bargain deals. And that might have been, I wish this was talked about more, but it might have shown us that players really hate arbitration, which I get, by the way. I
Yeah.
absolutely get. It's very anti-player. It's not as anti-player as like the franchise tag in football, but it's still, not the best to go through that as Corbin Burns would tell you, as he was really frustrated with the Brewers and now he's on the Orioles. So I think you guys are in a tremendous position, and it's such a good position that you guys just casually have a 3-win player on your team, yet you'd be more than willing to give up, perhaps even give up to a team like the Padres. And that's what we're going to talk about next, ladies and gentlemen. How about that tease? Here we go. But first, guys, let me talk to you about a place where you can bet potentially on Anthony Santander's home run total, or home run total with the Padres, or where he'll go, whatever. That's FanDuel, ladies and gentlemen. And we've been talking about FanDuel on both of our podcasts for a long time because they rule. And yes, football's over, but you can still get some buckets. NBA is going on right now. March Madness is coming up soon. All sorts of cool stuff. And they've got you covered. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if you win or lose. No, I'm just kidding. It's if your bet wins. But bet on all of your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same game parlays, exclusive props, and much, much more. Just visit fanduel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, Connor. Let's get to the moment of truth. What's going on with Anthony Santander? What's going on? Because this guy is a dude who casually hit a crap ton of home runs recently. And last year, he started off a little bit slow out of the gate from what I remembered. I had him in fantasy baseball. But this is a guy who's been an above WRC plus guy, not a great defender. But if you need power, this is one of those guys you could acquire. He hit 33 home runs in 2022, 28 last year, has the power, not too old either. He's going to be 29 this season. And you can probably get him for not too much. This isn't some established player. And like we've been talking about, a lot of the Orioles core is super young. So they can extend Gunnar and do all these things. So I'm wondering, first of all, is Anthony Santander available? I think is the first thing to talk about.
I think he's less available now after the sale. I think he's still available. I wouldn't say he's like untouchable. He is an impending free agent. He's going to be a free agent after 2024. Even with the new ownership, I think Mike Elias is open to dealing anyone who is an impending free agent, even with the Orioles winning. But the reason why I say he's less available is because a lot of Orioles fans, including myself, were worried that the John Angelos regime would trade him because he ended up getting about $12 million in arbitration for his final year. And before they signed Kimbrel for 12 to 13 million, Santander would have been by far the highest paid player on this Orioles team at 12 million. And we were looking at John Angelos continue to penny pinch. We were like, expiring contract, most expensive player, and in a spot where theoretically, if they think Heston Kjerstad is ready, they have an easy replacement to throw in there. O's fans were like, this is a trade that could happen. I don't think they're going to do it. I think they value Santander's bat in the middle of their order too much. Now, I'm not sure they're going to like extend him, but I think they're going to keep him around for this year. But because he's expiring, the right deal could still get him, I think, off of this Orioles roster, as long as Heston Kjerstad is hitting and healthy in spring training. If they're still worried about Kjerstad, they're not going to create a hole like that for themselves early in the year. But Kjerstad came up last September and his like batted ball numbers were insane. He made the playoff roster and he's basically the same as Santander. He's kind of an okay defensive outfielder, has to be in a corner, mostly will be in right field, can also play first base and has huge power from the left side. It's just a younger, cheaper version of Santander, the Orioles think. And so it's just about, would they get the right price? And I think that's what's interesting here. And I'm sure we'll talk about it too, is like Padres system is still solid, but they have traded away so much over the past few years. And I'm obviously not going to ask for anything like an Ethan Salas. But what I will say is, if the O's are going to trade Santander, there is no doubt about it, they will need an arm coming back. And what I am doing is kind of eyeing the Juan Soto return and saying, would you be willing to part with one of those guys and pretend like you got 3 pitchers and Anthony Santander for Juan Soto?
Hey, I'm all for headcanon. You know what I mean? As a pop culture connoisseur, I do that all the time whenever I'm upset and just pretend, right? That wouldn't be too bad. I think that it would be more likely you get like a prospect, not like Michael King. You can't have someone that's, especially on this team, but like Drew Thorpe, he was just acquired. You know what I mean? And it depends on how you feel about him with the strikeouts and all that stuff. And that's for another pod, but I could totally see that. Would I do it if I'm the Padres? First of all, for Padres fans, I think that what would have to happen here is that Tatis would move to center field. It would solve a little bit of your outfield problems. I'm sure that Tatis could play center field. He's certainly athletic for it, just won the Platinum Glove. So that could work. I'm not necessarily saying I would want to, just to pull the facade. Look, it's the offseason, guys. We like talking and speculating ideas just for funsies, even if they are a little bit outlandish, as I did with Ryan Finkelstein a couple weeks ago, talking about Pete Alonso for Manny Machado. If you guys want to listen to that fun, crazy filled episode. But look, that you would put Anthony Santander in right field, that would give you a bat that could hit for power for a team that, you know, occasionally is lacking it. They just lost Juan Soto. Then you have Tatis in center field. And then you have Jerickson Profar and a bunch of their other outfield prospects sharing time and left. And it's not the worst thing in the world. The only problem would just be the free agency thing. Can you give up an asset like Thorpe just for a 1-year deal for a guy? Maybe they do extend them. Lord knows the Padres love extending guys. But do you want to do that right now? I would lean against it. But even still, if, say, for some reason this Orioles team isn't good, I would be curious if he's available for possibly cheaper at the deadline if the Padres are in the driver's seat. Because I think that's the problem with the Padres right now, which is why they shouldn't be giving up too much, is because I'm confident in the team being better this year. Too many run games they lost all their extra innings until September. That to me is more fluky than not. They are still should be blamed, and you know there's a lot of problems with them, but that's just, if they were just average, they make the playoffs last year in those areas. So to me, I'm a little bit higher on the Padres for this year, but I don't want to overcommit because you don't want to destroy your farm again, which they've done about 4 times since I've been hosting this podcast. And miraculously, they keep regenerating it like they're Deadpool, right? Like they just heal super fast, but they have to keep that in mind. And they have to keep in mind that they have Ha-Seong Kim to potentially extend, which is something they may be interested in. So again, I don't know for sure, but I think it's more likely that Padres are in contention. Orioles are like, oh, Heston Kjerstad. If he's really good for them, then it's like, yeah, let's go get Anthony Santander for, you know, an Adam Mazer, a little bit lower of a prospect, maybe some guy who could help out in the Orioles bullpen, maybe, which is not a weakness. It was one of the reasons they survived, especially in the beginning of last year with guys like Felix Bautista, Javier, I don't know how to say his first name, Cano. Like their bullpen's very good, but even still, maybe that's an area where they help out. Orioles might be interested and say, yeah, I mean, we got a new owner, man. Like we got a new owner and we could trade everybody now. So I think that's what would make sense. It is a player for the Padres to keep an eye on, although they haven't quite been linked to them yet. Don't be surprised if they are. Frankly, don't be surprised in anything both of these teams do. Right? I think that that's where we're at right now because they're the Padres and because the Orioles might have a new owner. And I think it makes them both just giant wild cards this year that, frankly, I think need to be talked about a little bit more. Forget LA. No, you got Ohtani. Wow, big deal. Whatever, man. Who cares? You know what matters is guys like Corbin Burns and Ha-Seong Kim, not Shohei Ohtani, the most exciting player of the generation. But maybe that's just me.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. I mean, you know, we don't need to care about Juan Soto or Shohei Ohtani or Yoshinobu Yamamoto. Like it's all about real Ramon Arias hours. All right. These
Yeah,
are
man.
real Jorge Mateo hours. Speaking of Padres Orioles, these are real Jorge Mateo hours right now on this podcast. We don't care about Aaron Judge. We don't care about Will Smith. None of the Will Smiths. We don't care about any of the Will Smiths.
None of the Will Smiths, yeah.
Yeah. We are all in on real Jorge Mateo moving back to the outfield this year like he was doing with the Padres hours.
Yeah.
That's happening.
Yeah.
That's
Jorge Mateo, just a nice defender that you have just on the bench.
Yes.
Just for
also,
funsies, I guess.
A top 5 fastest player in baseball. It's nice to have that too.
That's really fun. I still remember when that happened and you picked them up and you were like, hey, you got anything on Mateo? And I'm like, whoa, hilariously enough, the Padres never try out anybody seemingly because they trade by the time it happens. But love Mateo, was part of one of my favorite walk-offs the team had in 2020 with Jerickson Profar driving him in. Very fun picture. Connor, man, I mean, this has been fun. I have to say, though, are there any last thoughts you have on this situation? Any last predictions? Because our teams actually don't play for a while. That might shock people, considering that they're in the American League and the National League, but they don't play for a while. I forgot to actually look up when they play, because that might be a game might be interesting to go to, because I'm close to Baltimore. Hold
Yeah, I
on one
believe
second.
because the O's went to San Diego last year. So I'm
Mhm.
assuming that the Padres, I mean, I will definitely be at one of those 3 games because I am there for a Manny Machado return to Baltimore at any time.
Yeah.
So that should be a good series. But I do think you were right about, if the Orioles were to somehow kind of fall in their face, I think they would almost like it would be a given they would trade Anthony Santander. So if the Padres are playing better, the Orioles are playing worse, that's certainly something to happen there. But I tend to agree with you. So much went wrong that didn't have to for the Padres last year.
Mhm.
The vibes were just, I've never seen the vibes more off for a team with talent than the
Yeah, man.
Padres last year. And I can't think that a Tatis, Machado, Hassan Kim, Yu Darvish based vibes team is going to do that again. So
Mhm.
I'm with you. I think the Padres now, the Dodgers are insane, but I think the
Yeah.
Padres are getting a wild card spot this year.
I do too. I just think, look, oh well, they lost Soto. They're probably losing Snell, and potentially to the Orioles. Who knows? And then Hader. But my thing is, I've seen this long enough. I've been watching baseball long enough. Sometimes you can patch things together, and they have the stars. So when you have the stars, just need some role players to step up. Maybe Jackson Merrill comes up and does some damage. Maybe Robbie Snelling does some damage. Maybe Michael King is awesome, because he's been awesome against a bunch of really good teams, by the way, in the AL East that can hit a lot. So Michael King could be awesome. And by the way, it is July 26th, start of a 3-game series against
Is
the
there a
Orioles.
chance Jackson Merrill could be up? Because you probably know this, but Jackson Merrill is a hometown guy, grew up right down the street from
So I have
Baltimore
heard this. I have
in
heard
Savannah
this.
Park, Maryland, and played at Savannah Park High School, which was also where he was coached by former big leaguer Eric Milton, who once threw a no-hitter for the
That I didn't
Twins.
know. Awesome.
But that would be a pretty cool homecoming. And like July, you said July.
The July
I mean,
26th to the 28th.
if they need him, like imagine a major league debut back in Baltimore for Jackson Merrill.
I might catch one of these games, man. I'm really tempted. I haven't been to Maryland, Baltimore. Or wait, I was in Chester like 2 years ago. But still, like I haven't been around there in a long time, and it was really fun. Do they still have that ride the ducks thing?
Yes. Yeah, it's
Because
where
I was on that.
the
Yeah.
wheels go up. Yeah, and it just goes
Yeah.
in the water.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
just
what I
don't
remember
fall in the
doing.
harbor. Just don't fall in the harbor. You
Oh
don't want
yeah,
to be in that
definitely
water.
not, man. Definitely
Uh,
not. My dad kept talking like Edgar Allan Poe the entire time we were there, like talking quote the Raven and all this stuff. And I'm like, all right, dad. Pipe down, buddy. And he was
all right.
also frustrated when we couldn't watch like the Yankees and they were playing like outside the hotel and we could literally see
Yeah.
the stadium, and he was just
Yeah.
livid. He's like, what has our country come to? But regardless, maybe I'll even see you at the game. Maybe I'll see any of you Friar Faithful folks at the game, or Orioles fans or whatever. But regardless, Connor, this has been a lot of fun as always, even though we don't do it as much because, shocker, different conferences. So not always anything between these two. But if the Santander trade does go through for the Padres at any point, of course, we will be on to discuss it, I imagine, with great enthusiasm and vigor and joy, I hope. But yeah, that about does it today for today's edition of the Locked On Padres and Locked On Orioles podcast. Be sure to check out me on Twitter at Javipeno, JAVIIPENO, or if you just want Padres stuff at LO_Padres. And also follow Connor at Connor Newcomb _. So his name and then an underscore after it. Just as simple as that. Locked On Orioles as well. Connor, any last words?
No, I will just say check out the live crossover happening from the upper deck at Camden Yards in late July.
Absolutely. The live crossover indeed. First for Locked On, I imagine. No, I'm just kidding. Oh yeah, go check out that live 24/7. I forgot to tell them that. Forgot to tell listeners. Live Locked On 24/7 channel for Locked On, showing all sorts of shows. It's the first 24/7 YouTube channel for all this sort of stuff. So go check that out. Until next time, though, stay faithful for our faithful homies, and stay beautiful, my Baltimore friends and pals, I guess. Until next time, everybody, take care.